Hey neighbor, welcome back to Ranked on ARTV. Today's episode is probably the most difficult I made up to this point, since I'm ranking every studio album by the alternative metal band Deftones from worst to best. Deftones are one of the most consistent rock acts out there. They haven't even come close to putting out a bad album, they never sold out, drastically changed up their sound, or drifted too far away from where they began. That doesn't mean they haven't innovated, because they sure as fuck have. In fact, they're one of the few bands on the planet that lovingly welcomes the tag nu metal, while also bending space and time by using elements of doom metal, shoegaze, and dream pop, and having a ton of lyrical tenacity that intentionally makes things open to interpretation. I'll admit the sound can be an acquired taste. They will beat your senses down and build them right back up with the way Chino Moreno goes from wailing screams to haunting singing, but any fan of theirs will tell you that it's well worth the deep dive. The alt metal legends have 9 studio albums, so those main entries are going to be the ones that I'm placing from worst to best, of course in my own personal biased opinion. I feel like I've got some pretty weird placements in the mix, but I want to repeat myself so I make it clear. Deftones don't have a bad album to their name. Leave your ranking in the comments down below, and if you enjoy the video, take a quick second to like it. These ranked episodes take a ton of time and effort to create, so if you'd be willing to like or share out the link that isn't dead with another fan, I'd actually really appreciate that. My Patreon is also the top link down below if you want to support the content financially, but for now, let's get this ranking in motion at number 9. Sorry, Gore! That's the same thing I said after the 2000 presidential election got overturned, but no drama, no hate, just a simple fact that something has to come last, and I happen to think that this solid as hell album just comes up a little bit short on the execution. In the vast ocean of sounds Deftones have tried on, I've rarely thought they were repeating themselves or just wandering, but sadly those sidesteps scatter about on their 8th album. Many of Chino's vocals feel reminiscent of better, stronger highlights from earlier in the career albums, although I've gotta give it up to Stefan and Abe for picking up the slack and making the record more immersive. Territorial dissonance between the members was intentionally explored on Gore, marking a line in the sand that broke apart some of their natural chemistry to approach songwriting from a different angle. The end results are often clutch, with the hypnotic daydream Phantom Bride guiding the path with a blazing melodic solo, and other jaw-droppers like Acid Hologram that sort of feel out the environment before dropping the anvil with that guitar distortion buried in layers of secrecy. Others have a different story, which is fine, I just haven't felt the urge to revisit them nearly as much. There's undoubtedly barrel loads of emotion packed into the playing style, and songs like Rubicon grow on me tenfold over the years to show me why the band members other than Chino are so important to Gore as an experience. Adrenaline is so pure in so many ways, and I love it for that. It's straightforward and consistent with loads of nu metal riffage, Terry Date got his first stab at producing for Deftones, and Chino blends in some rapping with his more manic screams. Does it sound dated? Absolutely, but good God, I dare you to try and find more than a handful of 90s bands whose debut album still holds up this ferociously. Curveball curb stomps get hand-delivered on this Cutthroat album. You can tell the band were young, but they were clearly having a ton of fun in the studio while letting all of these inner demons go to the music. The guitar tone is a little one-noted, and that becomes all too apparent the longer you sit with it, but it's not something that you get pissed about, I don't think. There's enough forward momentum to make it likable, so get your headbangs in, reflect on how far they've come, and then keep going. For a taste of what was to come, don't skip the Shadowbound Lifter, considering how suspenseful that track is, or the absolutely wild cut Engine number 9, where they just throw it balls to the wall reckless in the most mid-90s way known to man, If you like System of a Down, I could see Root being an instant favorite, and just my 2 cents, Birthmark is probably the best song on here, and it shows how truly talented the late great bassist Chi Cheng truly was. R.I.P. Chi, I didn't know where in the video to put this, but I just wanted to give a huge acknowledgement to how big of a role he played in the success of Deftones. He kills it on bass from this record all the way until Saturday Night Wrist, and while I didn't become a fan until 2010 or 2011, shortly before the time in which Chi passed, I was lucky enough to have a friend that taught me all about the band's legacy, including his, so my eternal respect goes out to their fallen bassist, as well as his talented successor, Sergio Vega. Saturday Night Wrist, I'm sorry to inform you that you've been kicked out of the club for being too damn weird. At least, that's what it feels like, and I know I'm not helping its reputation any by putting this all the way down at number 7, but I mean this with every ounce of authenticity I can muster. It's still a really good album! It's their final one with Chi on bass, and I love that he gets a creative spotlight throughout and on my favorite song, Cherry Waves, but there are some really oddball moments here that tank the pacing, meaning I can't in good faith rank this any higher. There's a shitload of atmospheric bliss if you can wrap your head around it, but don't expect to fall in love at first listen if this record is foreign to you. Serj Tankian from System of a Down is on the aggressive Mine, although without him, I'm not sure the song has that much to make itself stand out, and in terms of other guest appearances, Deftones have a lot of great ones throughout their catalog, but this next one is not that. It's Annie Hardy, who appears on Pink's Cell Phone, and for the life of me, I cannot get into this song. It's literally the only Deftones song I can think of that I actively do not like. The speech at the end is just pointlessly vulgar and wandering, which is the point, but I don't care. It's not for me. I skip it every time. Back to the positivity spectrum, you can find solace in the comfort of an instrumental highlights select start, which is really tempting to just leave on a loop in the background to calm yourself down or maybe fall asleep to. Kim Dracula rips out a lot of flashy guitars for a headbanger sound. Xerxes puts Frank Delgado to task with a major emphasis on synths, and it works really well to expand their sound. And Rapture lets both Chino and Abe go buck wild doing what they do best. Turns out I don't have a ton to say about this record. Many of the songs on Saturday Night Wrist don't stray too far from the path of what you'd expect, but they certainly heat up and then cool the jets at stranger times than usual, making for an uneven listening experience. For some, the oddities are only going to enhance the love you feel for the band, but for others, some of the production choices might make it too spotty to make it worthy of a consistent spot in your rotation. Deftones went for a guillotine move on Diamond Eyes, an aggressive machine that sees some of the most genty alt metal the guys ever laid down. Not only that, it's also one of the most straightforward pawns they ever played, clocking in at just 41 minutes and fooling us all into thinking this is an extremely heavy album, when in reality, the sounds are way more ethereal than I previously gave them credit for. Their core sound got a facelift without overexposing the new elements, a high-wire walk that's clearly not easy to complete given how many bands I've seen fall flat on their faces trying to accomplish this exact feat. Now, I'm not always a fan of Nick Raskulinecz as a producer, but he fits Deftones pretty well both here and on the record after this, given that the vocals don't always need to be the center of attention. To be totally honest, while I do love the heavier side of Deftones, I have an even bigger luxury suite in my heart on reserve for their softer explorations that strike a match for shoegazing, alternative, or post-rock. There's a surprisingly large amount of those gems lining the diamond-coated walls, slowing the pace as they sharpen their skills in the name of atmosphere. It's their secret weapon, and the biggest wins for me are the 5-minute game changer Beauty School and the haunting closer This Place Is Death. Both cuts showcase diversity in Abe's drumming, elegance in Stefan's guitar, even patience in playing as Sergio and Chino adapt to different roles based on what the song's spirit is calling for. They're easily top favorites on Diamond Eyes, but they're not alone with their paradigm shift. The final 4 songs that close out the album all have distinct qualities that drop the intensity, not entirely, but they slow up a bit to give the unique musicianship a chance to shine. There's not a skippable song in sight, so whether you think I've rated this way too high or way too low, I'm gonna have to point back to my hands being tied. No bad albums, remember? Everything's gotta go somewhere, but more important than the number is the fact that Diamond Eyes did go somewhere. It's a record that steadily beams light from space into your head, leaving you to float into the void, illuminating from everything you've just heard. The self-titled album was historically known for being one of their heaviest, yet my first taste came from one of the most shoegazy songs, Minerva, which was actually the first Deftones song I heard, period. Clearly, I didn't think too much of it at the time in 2005, with this glowing 2-star review hot off the press, and yes, I kept a log of every single song I heard for the first year or two when I was actually getting into music. It's adorable, deal with it. I don't think this album is really as heavy as some people make it out to be. Sure, it sets off plenty of solar flares that declare war against a quiet listen, but are we forgetting how freaky some of the deep cuts got? For every hexagram, there's a lucky you, a yin and a yang to keep the record in tow. I love that about the self-titled, and thankfully through the long, arduous process of putting this list in order, I gained a deeper appreciation for the musical intoxication Deftones provided. Jagged, buoyant riffs might catch your ear on the amazing needles and pins, which deserves to be called out as a highlight. The suspense works so well in the verses, with the culling bass sharpening the blade just out of sight before the hook goes straight for the throat. The weary battle axe clues us into their world of battered and bruised consistency. Minerva still feels just as haunting now as it did decades ago. Anniversary of an uninteresting event takes brooding apathy to a new skill level, and the tyrannical when girls telephone boys strikes like a telephone pole in a lightning field. It gets ugly in the way that you'd want Deftones to get really ugly. My favorite run on the self-titled is tracks 6 through 9. It starts out with 2 songs I've already touched on as praiseworthy, but the back half of that 4-song pairing is where things get even crazier. Lucky You lets turntablist Frank Delgado do his thing, and the results are pure fire. Low-key drum and bass rumbles the extraterrestrial mix, with Frank taking swipes at his board as Chino masterfully puts his voice lower in the mix to really suit the experimental attitude of the song. Bloody Cape follows after, and I love how blown out the guitar sounds to gently transition the two, slowly giving way to a more in-your-face and confrontational style that proves to be extremely effective. Dare I say it? I think I might have to. Deep breath, everyone. Around the Fur might be the best nu metal album of all time. It sets the bar so damn high it's ridiculous, and if you couldn't tell Deftones were bound to break the chains of the genre without losing the roots of the movement, well, you weren't really listening, were you? Around the Fur contains some of the most highly revered Deftones songs of all time, including Be Quiet and Drive and My Own Summer, both of which are singles, and both of which love adding extra words to their titles in parentheses. Those are without a doubt classics, and I credit Shove It for being an early love of mine that got me into heavier music before I even really knew much about the band, plus Be Quiet and Drive still strikes a raw nerve. It's so beautiful and overwhelming and pure in a fucked up kind of way. That's not to say they're the best songs on the album, although they're pretty high up there for sure for me in the ranking, but there's still a lot of reckless danger to be found. Leave it to them to very early on establish that they were unpredictable, given the tightrope act they walked throughout the experience. Head Up comes out swinging like it's gonna be the heaviest thing on here, and I love that crushing riff so much, but the final half of the song is really just weird, droney experiments, but it fucking works, both on its own and as a way to set up the closer MX. From the taunting rickets that demands to be blasted at full volume, to the twinges of mascara that leaves you with an unsettling fear, Around the Fur is a diamond in a genre that many would consider to be the rough. Years roll by and I only feel like I love it more, even if it's not something that I've constantly got in rotation, but sometimes the best records need to be given space, if only to prove that their disappearance from your life was a mistake. invite them back cordially, or in this case, maybe violently, like a vampire that needs permission to enter your headphones. Now that we've cracked the top 3, my heart is starting to tear into little pieces. Every one of these is a perfect score album from me, so the margins from here on out, they're razor thin. I started working on this video last fall, and without a doubt, this is an album to take in during the colder months. There's an unreal amount of imagery that bleeds off the page to your head. Koi no Yoken is vivid, unshakable, and smooth. It warms my soul in the way that few albums could. It's the definitive balance between their signature heavy and calm sounds. They're not afraid to get dreamy, but watch your throat, cause Deftones are coming in for the kill. Given that I fell in love with the band around the time this album was released, when I saw them live for the first time with Ghost and Avenged Sevenfold, they were playing a solid amount of these songs live. The feeling of Swerve City, Rosemary, Tempest, and Poltergeist in a concert setting probably elevated these even higher in my mind. Not to be forgotten is the seamless manner in which the bones of these songs intertwine, pivoting from Full Throttle to Peaceful Waters effortlessly as the likes of Romantic Dreams fades to black, giving way to the brooding opening of Leathers, which gets a lot more scream-oriented as it evolves. That's just one of many examples, and it happens to be right off the top, with the title Swerve City being a perfect summary of the masterclass you're about to witness. Not to mention, that's also one of the best songs on this thing. It detonates riff bombs to quickly toss you into their storm as you start to realize this ain't the kind of storm you want to escape. Let it lift the entire house up and carry it away. We're not in Kansas anymore. Breathtaking soundscapes emerge through the closing section of Koi, with tons of my personal favorites popping up in the back half. Not to shrug off the early moments, please don't get it twisted, because those cut deep too, especially the pensive Entombed, but stuff like Rosemary with its twisted riffs make this 7 minutes in heaven. Plus, Tempest? That really just feels like whiskey from the top shelf. Woo! Can't forget to shout out Chino's woos. They're a go-to for him, not only on this record, but he's done it in the past too. He does it a lot on some of the most memorable tracks, including what might be my favorite song on the album, Goon Squad. Ask me another day and I might tell you Koi no Yoken's my favorite Deftones album. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's up in the air, splitting hairs at this point, so whether it's 3, 2, 1, all that really matters is that I've nailed down my point about this being a definitive meteoric compiling of genius from a long-running band that aren't afraid to extend their strengths. 30 years later has absolutely no right to sound this fresh. What the fuck, Deftones? How dare you not slowly compromise your legacy by bending to the will of what the label gods want? Psh, out here turning in career-defining records 25 years after the debut. I think I speak for all of your washed-up 90s peers when I say, can't relate! An ohm in technical terms is a measurement of electrical resistance, and I don't think they could have titled this album in a more Deftones-appropriate manner if they tried. Thick waves of electricity ebb and flow from the center of the band to serve as the power plant, pumping out enough energy to keep their world on the grid 24/7, even if some of these songs could be described as rolling blackouts, the good kind, if that is such a thing. Chino's vocals are the work of a titan, a seasoned pro unafraid to rely on his instincts to power through this tightrope act between manic delusions and powerful observations on the world through his lens. Stefan rocks on a 9-string guitar throughout ohms, which would probably explain why the riffs cut like a fucking dagger. It's masterful musicianship, eclipsed only possibly by Abe's drumming, which just goes ballistic without ever letting the ship sink around him. The title track piqued my interest immediately. I really like how it feels like a breath of fresh air with the Spotlight-style guitar intro, but the second single, Genesis, proved to be a shark in the water and one of my favorite songs of 2020. But those are just the tip of the iceberg. You'll get ripped to shreds by the thrashing spell of mathematics, or sent into a hypertrance on the atmospheric headless that at first felt like the odd man out, but with time, you'll realize it fits the puzzle flawlessly. Deftones never seem to run out of tricks to keep your head banging as you'll air guitar along to the punchy This Link Is Dead, or take off for a cold late night drive with Ceremony blasting on the stereo. It's basically what I'd call a perfect album, and if nothing else, it's living proof that these guys aren't even close to being at the end of their rope. If anything, they climbed back to the top for the first time in a long time as they paid homage to their entire discography. White Pony probably took a lot of y'all's Deftones virginity, and my fellow Deftonians, I'm actually right there with you. This was my first and clearly best time too, because this was a very close race to the top, but White Pony is still coming out as king. I knew a few of their songs before my manager at the movie theater I worked at in the early 2010s turned me onto their albums, but it was surface level knowledge at best, so Will, if you ever see this somehow, thank you for sitting me down and properly introducing me to not only Deftones, but also Sunny Day Real Estate, Tool, and so many other bands. That shit had a very profound impact on my taste in music. Surprise, surprise, not that many nu metal fans were exactly open-minded at the turn of the 21st century, so it should go without saying that not everyone was in love with this paradigm shifting of sounds, at least not right away. They'd established themselves as a gigantic force in metal, so for them to come out swinging with heaviness and thoughtful atmosphere, actually, y'all probably should have seen that one coming. There were hints all over around the fur. Artistry over genre, people. When I examine this record current day, I'm almost drawn more to the twists of fate, the fork in the road where Deftones choose to create their own path without losing what made them so exceptional. Knife Party, for example. How wild is that one? You know, there's some ethereal vocals that pop up in the background as the song goes on that might remind you of a certain Pink Floyd hit, but it's also heavy, catchy, and a lot like Touching the Hand of God. Digital Bath is also a grand exercise in expansion gone right. Teenager lightens the mood without sacrificing the pace of the album, and cuts like RX Queen and Korea smash your face in to remind you that they've got no real intention of totally abandoning a gritty, gruesome sound. They're both top-notch favorites, but even still, they can't quite hold a candle to the superhuman heroes we know as Passenger and Change. Can we just agree that those two songs back-to-back are one of the most insane dynamic duos of all time? Maynard from Tool trades words with Chino and its musical ecstasy. Topped only by Maynard singing the chorus, the entire track is just unreal in the sense that it even exists in our timeline. The legend of White Pony sprints valiantly into the night, out of sight but never out of mind. This is the work of icons in the making, so what originally might have been a bit of a gamble turned out to be a high-stakes investment worth making. Cue it up, remove the distractions, visualize their duality, and let the world of Deftones enfold you with an all-time classic. That's my ranking for all 9 albums by the alternative metal band Deftones. This video took me ages to make because I kept doubting myself, going back and altering the list, revisiting albums, you name it, I did it! I wanted to make sure I felt right before I put it out to the world, so I hope you enjoyed hearing my reviews for each record. If you did, then please take a quick second to like this video and drop a comment. That engagement really helps out the channel, and if you want to make your heart grow 3 sizes today, then share this out with a friend, or better yet, another community of Deftones fans. Love goes out to everybody supporting me on Patreon, as well as my current $75 patrons, Dayton, Brandon, and Sombre Artist. You can see a few other episodes of Ranked on screen right now, and other than that, I'll be back soon for more on ARTV.